Alright, I'm just going to go over real quick the controls and bones of the face right here. So I've got the bone in the forehead that's pretty much a parent of the whole top half of her face. So all her eyebrows, eyes, top part of her nose. The front part of her nose is special. It always keeps a certain distance from this controller in the front of her mouth, and it points to it. So if I take that one right there, move it forward, you can see her nose points towards it. If I move it any other direction, her nose points toward it, and the nose keeps a certain distance from it. So that way, if it moves up or around or whatever, the nose moves up and around as well. And her chin and her jaw area. I've got a couple of bones here on the front that you can move around to make her jaw giant or small. And on the back side, something you can kind of control a little bit more. That. Her ears have a master control just for moving or sizing or rotating the ears from their default location. But also there's a stretch to bendy bone here, which you can use to move it around and maybe get more of a, an elf sort of look or whatever. Alright, as well, there are 8 bones around her mouth, around her lips, I should say. And they're the outside corners and top and middle and bottom and middle. They have action constraints on them for opening, smiling, or smooching her mouth. And those are keyed on this controller right here. So see if I move it on its y-axis, she smooches or sort of does a little half smile grimace there. If I move it on its z-axis, she goes either smiling or definitely a snarl like that. And then finally, if I move it on its x-axis, actually I don't have any other one there. That one just moves her mouth right and left. It's if I scale it, then her mouth opens and closes. So you can go from the default powers to closed, for example, and maybe I could move her purse her lips a little bit more like that. So that's all achieved with action constraints. I have a bunch of action constraints in all the bones of her mouth, her cheeks, and even sometimes a bit of her nose, or up here at the bottoms of her eyes for a really wide smile. So let's turn on the controller shapes so that we can see a bit more what's going on. So there's a controller in the back side of her mouth here, or I should say the middle of her mouth right there, where the tip of her tongue is presently. And that has many things, or the children of that. Well, actually, they're not children of that, they're all children of this, which is related to it. So if I grab this controller on the front side of her mouth, I can use that, see, for scaling it down or scaling it up, or moving her mouth around. Something like that, right? So you can get quite a bit of action there. And so you want, when you're doing that, you want the controller and her nose to point to the mouth controller. That's that yellow one I was just playing with. And you also want to limit the distance on surface of it. So as you move it around, her nose also moves around. So here you can see her nose is moving and pointing all the time to that. The controller on the back side, or in the middle of her mouth there, like I say, it's this one on the front limits the distance to it, so you can move the whole thing forward. If you move this down, generally she becomes less happy. If you move it up, she's generally becoming more happy. So if I put her in a default pose, for example, and move that controller up, then basically she's doing a very half-hearted smile there. And if I take the same controller and move it down, then it's a very disgusted look, I suppose, would be the word there. This one that ends up needing to probably move up a little bit to finish off the look. Another thing is these controllers between the corners of her mouth and the centers of her mouth. These controllers that come around here, they also have action constraints on them, but also looks like a copy location constraint with a partial weight. And that way, as you move the corner of her mouth, for example, you can see these other 2 bones that are halfway between the corner and the center are also moving along for the ride. One bone is here, one is here. I do that for all four of those bones that are in the halfway point. So between the action constraints and the driver constraints that I have on those bones, you can get quite a bit of varied emotion from the mouth. When the mouth is open, because I'm using an action constraint, I have to very carefully tweak the rotation and the sizing and the location of these bones. If they're off just a little bit, then you can get a little bit of a strange look. But you can also use that on purpose, like see if you want to have her do a different sort of look than just the default. You can get that by moving those controls around like that. Suppose also I should mention the tone controller. It's the tone controller has the tongue bendy bone and stretch to constrain bit goes to it. These two bones on the outside of the tongue are just for extending the weight of the bit in the middle. That way her cheeks don't end up making the tongue move. I have a couple of controllers in the cheeks in case I want to move them out or scale them up or scale them down or whatever there. Those can be useful if you want to pull her cheeks out. Okay, let's put it back in place there. You have a controller in her chin for moving the jaw, and that also, of course, moves the teeth. That way you can have her chew without opening and closing her mouth. See, like that. If you were to make her chew like that, you might grab the other controller there, move both her chin. Probably you'd want to move it more than her mouth, but you can end up doing that and getting some good chewing action going on there. But remember, the nose points to the mouth controller, that's that one, and moves along with it. Always make sure the nose moves when the mouth is moving a great deal, because those move in tandem. They don't move with full force. If you take a look at this one, you see move with mouth, it's only at a 0.7 strength, and only pointing also with the 0.7 strength. I suppose I should mention the eye controllers a little bit. There's a parent of the whole thing, so if you want to move the entire eye structure around, there's a bone that's a parent of that. Or I suppose if you want to scale them up and make her have big eyes. Those are some pretty big eyes. It actually looks pretty funny. It's a little bit of a fun distraction there. Okay, right, we'll put that back to normal. So, and then inside of the eyes, you've got a thing to control the eyeball itself. That way, if I grab this controller, her eyes move. The eye is attached to one bone that points to the other bones out here, so you can independently control one eye or the other one. But also, there's another bone that copies the rotation of that main bone right there, but only with a partial weight. There it is, right there. Copies the rotation at 0.5, and then all the eyelid structure is a child of that. So if you grab this controller and move it around, her eyes move fully to point at 100%, but the eyelids move about 50% to go follow it. I like the look of that. Apparently some artists don't. So make up your own mind about how much you want the eyelids to follow along with the eyes. The eyelids are doing a stretch to these bones here. So if I pull that bone down, it will be to close her eye. Pull this bone up, it's to close her eye from the bottom. These controls I'm still very much not pleased with. I think I'm going to go back to something like Regify and put just a bunch of bones around her eyes and then allow the bones to move by an action constraint rather than the mechanical setup I've got going right now. The problem with the mechanical setup is you can just see the eyelashes are very strange, not in their appropriate location when her eyes are closed. Her eyes aren't even entirely closed. If I close them entirely, it starts to look rather rough. Yeah, fully closed. Look at those eyelashes. So I've got to fix that part. This part is part I'm not very satisfied with. Eyelashes, of course, can be moved independently. Each individual part of the eyebrows, excuse me, can be moved via these controllers. But also there's a controller up here to just control all eyebrows at once. You can move it down to move her eyebrows down, up to move them up. On the y-axis, I can move it one way to give her sort of a surprised for a brow look, and the other way to give her an angry brow look. I believe that's about it. I suppose if you move it right and left, it moves along with the eye. So if you move it, the eye controller and the eyebrow controller on the x-axis, it'll open up her eyes very wide or close them quite narrowly. That is about it for the bones in Giazelle's face rig. We get a lot of mileage out of these constructs, so I haven't had to do too much more than this. It has worked pretty well. Thanks for watching. Go out there, find an artist, and give them the amount that you think matches the value they're bringing to the world.